Is outside Roosevelt Hospital. Lynn, just bring us up to date, would you? What happened? How did it happen? Under what circumstances did John Lennon die?
Apparently, Ted, it happened around 10 o'clock this evening. John Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono, I'm told, were returning from a recording session or somewhere else in a limousine, got out of the limousine to their apartment at the Dakota, where they were shot by a man who has been described, as you have said, by the police as deranged or a kook or something like that. Immediately, John Lennon was brought right here to Roosevelt Hospital. This is only about 13 blocks away from his apartment, so it didn't take too long to get him here. According to Dr. Stephen Lynn, who's the director of emergency room services here, he just gave us a briefing. He said that Lennon was brought here this evening shortly before 11 p.m. He was dead on arrival. There were extensive resuscitation efforts that were made, but none of them did any good. There were transfusions that were attempted. None of them were able to save his life. He apparently had multiple wounds in his chest. The doctor said there were 7 wounds, but he could not tell exactly how many bullet shots that meant. He knew that it was a gun, but he couldn't say what kind of gun, nor could he say how close the shots had been fired, nor whether they were from the front or from the rear. He said there was signs of injuries of the major blood vessel in his chest, and that is clearly what he died from. Also, the doctor said that apparently Lennon was dead at the moment of the first shot. He could tell that by the size of the injuries. Once again, they tried everything that they could to revive him, and there was absolutely nothing they could do. And once again, the suspect is in custody. Yoko Ono was here with John Lennon when he was brought in. She was at his side. And the hospital has been pretty much surrounded with fans and other onlookers since the event happened. Ted?
Lynn, what happened at the scene? Were there any eyewitnesses who described what happened?
Yeah, Ted, apparently there were a number of eyewitnesses, and the police got everybody together rather quickly. They are all at the precinct right now. We haven't been over there yet. I assume that's where we're headed next.
All right, Lynn Scher, thank you very much indeed. That then the latest on John Lennon, shot and killed this evening at the age of 40. He leaves behind his widow, Yoko Ono, and a small child. We'll have more. On was rushed to New York's Roosevelt Hospital after being shot several times in the chest. At the hospital, Dr. Stephen Lynn, director of emergency room services, made the announcement of Lennon's death.
John Lennon was brought to the emergency room at the Roosevelt site, St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, this evening, shortly before 11 p.m. He was dead on arrival. Extensive resuscitative efforts were made, but in spite of transfusions and many procedures, he could not be resuscitated.
Where was he shot, Doc, and how many times?
He had multiple gunshot wounds in his chest, in his left arm, and in his back.
How many shots are we talking about?
There were 7 wounds in his body.
7 bullets?
Standing by live now in New York with more late details on the shooting is ABC's Lynn Scher.
Thank you, Ted. As we just heard from Dr. Lynn, that was the briefing that we got just about, 30 minutes ago right here at Roosevelt Hospital. He said also that apparently John Lennon was dead with the first gunshot. He said the wounds were just so extensive that he probably did not survive the first shot. He said, indeed, there were 7 wounds and there was major damage to a major artery inside of his chest. We have also learned that the body of John Lennon will be taken either tonight or tomorrow morning to the city morgue at Bellevue Hospital. The medical examiner is already inside Roosevelt Hospital here doing preliminary investigations, but they will do a complete autopsy tomorrow. Yoko Ono has gone home. We don't know whether to her own apartment or somewhere else, and the crowd is pretty much dissipated here. But once again, John Lennon dead on arrival here at Roosevelt Hospital in New York.
Killed last night outside of his apartment house here in New York City. And in just a few minutes, we're going to meet and talk with 2 men who knew John Lennon very well, both personally and professionally. Murray the K, disc jockey.
But now at 30 minutes, almost 31 after 7 o'clock, Steve Bell.
Who police say had been in New York for about a week, apparently stalking Lennon. Police described Chapman as a wacko. Witnesses say he shot Lennon 5 times as the musician returned to his apartment last night, then dropped his gun and waited for police. Authorities say they do not know of any motive for that killing. Informed of Lennon's death this morning, his former songwriter partner in the Beatles, Paul McCartney, said, "I can't take it. John was a great guy. He's going to be missed by the whole world." As June Massal reports, many of John Lennon's fans and admirers heard about his death on late-night radio music programs.
The tributes will be flowing. On the Morning Star, Scott McConnell will feature the music of John Lennon, solo and Beatles work all morning long.
The news of John Lennon's death was broadcast all night long on various Chicago radio stations.
There's a Lennon special tonight at 10 o'clock, a look at the life and the music of John Lennon, as complete as you can get it. And
inside bars, the reaction was similar. Shock. Some had just learned about it.
Oh, no, that's a great loss. Are you kidding me?
I'm serious. What kind of memories of John Lennon do you have?
And, hey, I grew up with John Lennon. I can't say I grew up with him, but I mean, I listened to him when he was in
a gentleman who I guess was painted in the press as being a lot different than I knew him. He was a bit biting. Some people thought he was cynical. My experience with him was, of all the Beatles, he was a very kind man. Very kind, especially to me. There were times that being called the fifth Beatle was sort of a hang-up for me. I think he understood that sensitivity. I think John Lennon, if there was anything that he gave us besides his music, I believe he gave us something else. He was in a way a very controversial person. But I think the great thing about John Lennon was the fact that he always dealt